I'm supposed to have done a C small Drew moment, and I don't have a joke. So has anybody got a C small Drew joke for us? Well, thank you very much. Moving right along. Now, I take the great honor in introducing Chris Tait, who's going to be our speaker for the evening. I think it was around 1986, Chris. Am I right about that? That Chris stood up. As far as I know, he was the first student in a Manitoba school to stand up and say, "I don't want to pray." And I'll let him tell us exactly how it is that turned out. But we've noticed that, and Chris has noticed, that prayer has been introduced back into some Manitoba schools, which, according to my understanding of the law, is contrary to what the guidelines are. And Chris is here to talk to us about that. So with no further ado, and with great honor, we bring one of our stand-up humanists of the year. Thank you.
Well, thanks to Jeff and Barry for the invitations to attend here. I certainly appreciate that, and it sounds like you folks are doing a lot of very good work. Some of my ancestors are actually buried just across the road at the St. James Anglican Cemetery. They were, of course, Protestants, and were here from the fur trade times, very much determined to continue with the Protestant British tradition. One of my ancestors was actually guarding Fort Garry when Riel took it over, and this is partly what we see today, a traditional fight between the Catholics and between the Protestants. And what apparently happened late one evening, that my ancestor was trying to raise the British flag when Riel was in the fort, and Riel became quite angry with him. And what we see today, again, is the fight between creating a Catholic society, and what came into place with the Public Schools Act was to create a society which was British and which was Protestant. At that time, my ancestors were perhaps on the wrong side of things and wanted to help create that Protestant society. Our farm actually would have been about in this area as well. This was actually our river lot. That's my connection to this area and connection to history. So in 1890, when the Public Schools Act came in, it said that prayer would be held every day. The intention was that it would be a Protestant prayer, and that was very deliberate, again, to keep the Catholics down and to create an English society. And what we're seeing today are the vestiges of that system that are still in place. It's one of the last places where we see a great intrusion of religion into public life. You don't have to pray before you get your mail, for example. You don't have to pray before you get your driver's license. Somehow we've come to a historical position where it's okay, we think, to have prayer in public schools and to harass children with this type of activity. In my own case, when I was going to high school in McGregor, in grade 9 and grade 10, we had no prayer at all when I started high school, and that situation was quite satisfactory to me, and it was quite good for all of the students. Somewhere around the end of grade 10, there was a department inspection, so the Department of Education came out to make sure that English is being taught in the schools and that math is being taught, and they noticed there wasn't prayer, which was required by the legislation at that time. So the department asked the school, told the school, you got to get these kids praying. That's part of the law. It has to take place. So starting in grade 11, every morning after O Canada, we'd be asked to stand for O Canada. Then there'd be a scratchy broadcast of the Lord's Prayer with the public address system. We were expected to stand and show respect for that particular God. What happened after that, there was a petition organized by students. The vast majority of the students signed a petition saying, in fact, they didn't want the prayer. And there perhaps is a generation gap, which isn't too surprising. Many of the students, in fact, didn't want the prayer. Perhaps the parents did, but the students themselves wanted nothing to do with it. Now, of course, the school wasn't required to accept the petition, didn't accept it, continued on with the prayer. And by December of 1985, I was 16 at that time, I was getting pretty frustrated with the whole situation. So one day I decided to sit down during the prayer. From there, my teacher told me I couldn't sit down, I'd have to go to the hallway. So I tried going to the hallway, and of course found that prayer was broadcast in the hallway too, so this didn't really seem to be a very sensible project. Further, I was called to the principal's office, told I couldn't go to the hallway because I was 17, I needed permission from my parents to go to the hallway and listen to the same prayer in the hallway. So obviously this wasn't progressing too well. After that, I just returned to the classroom and started sitting through the prayer every morning. So what happened in December of 1985 is that I was told by the principal if I didn't comply, I'd be kicked out of school. And in January 1986, that's what happened. I was then 17 by that time. So the principal had called me into the office to say that I was suspended for not following orders, essentially, not participating in the prayer, and I was told not to come back to school. We lived in a rural area, and I waited at the end of the lane the next morning. The school bus came, I got on it, went back to school, went back into the classroom, broadcast the prayer, I sat down again. So this went on for a period of days. The school bus kept coming, I kept going to school, kept sitting through the prayer. The principal kept telling me that I was suspended from school. In the end, I received a letter from the division indicating that I was suspended for 15 days. And the intention was that I would not go to school again unless I prayed as they saw fit. And things didn't quite turn out that way. In the end, we had to hire a lawyer, and I was proceeding with an injunction that would have forced the school to allow me back into school to continue with my education. Sometimes lawyers can change things, and in that case, once a lawyer was involved, the school changed the position and then agreed that I could come back in on a different plan where I go to a room where the prayer wasn't broadcast. We made a bit of progress. It cost us some money, unfortunately, and it shouldn't have been necessary to involve a lawyer, but at least got things moving along. The reaction we got out of this from the Christian community was quite fascinating. That we received death threats, we received harassing phone calls, somewhere in the area of 170. We had the headlights smashed out of the car and graffiti about communists scribbled on the windshield. We had a black cross painted on the highway in front of our farm, and scrap iron put in the field to damage our machinery. So at the end of that, I wondered what morality in particular these people are promoting, that you, first of all, want to use the state to force your religion on people, that you threaten them if they don't participate the way that you want, you punish them, and sneak around at night and damage their property and threaten to kill people. And I wondered if we could do just as well without that kind of morality in the schools or in society in general. In addition to all of that wonderful stuff, a petition was organized largely by division employees of the school division, saying the issue was discipline, it wasn't religion. That was circulated, and people were told that they had to sign or they wouldn't be welcome in the community. So that created a lot of damage that was quite unnecessary. The Minister of Education was asked at one point, she was having a press conference about something else, and she was asked, well, what about this situation in McGregor? What are you going to do? And the minister said, I'm not going to get involved. That's the school's right to discipline people, even if it's a religion issue. So that was the position of the government at the time, and I don't doubt it's still the position of the government now. They say these are internal matters, and so if you want to punish people over religion, feel free, go to it. When I was finishing university in 1989, Premier Pauly was there. He perhaps wasn't premier by that time. His daughter was also graduating, and he came over to talk to my family and myself, and he said how it was such a terrible thing that had happened to us. And he said it reminded him of the movie Mississippi Burning, about the civil rights issue in the United States. And he was saying how awful he felt. And it was very nice. It was a very beautiful gesture and a nice thing to say. But he was the premier at the time, so I wondered, you know, you're the governor of Mississippi, then why didn't you do something? By the 1990s, there were court challenges in British Columbia, in Ontario, and in Manitoba. Manitoba was in 1992. In all three of those provinces where the issue went to court, the court ruled that this type of activity is a violation of the Charter of Rights, the religious freedom section of the Charter, and struck down the legislation in all three provinces. And so we thought that daily prayer in schools in Manitoba was to an end. Immediately after the court decision in Manitoba, a number of school divisions did something quite remarkable. They said, we don't care about the court. We're going to defy the court. We're going to continue on and do what we want. And that's essentially what's happened, and government has helped to facilitate that. The remaining provision in the Act is that parents can petition on an annual basis to have prayer reinstated. And so that's the section that's being relied on and being abused to put prayer back in place. The government that was in power at the time helped to develop guidelines, not to say that this shouldn't take place, but to help actually for it to go ahead. And the guidelines use very weak language. They use terms like could and may and perhaps, and rather than things like will and must, some absolute certainty. So as it stands now, if 75% of parents petition in a school with fewer than 80 students, or at least 60 if there's 80 or more students, prayer can start again. And of course the numbers are such that the only possible outcome can be a Christian religion in the rural area. You're not going to have, for example, 60 Buddhists in a place like McGregor or Winkler or any other place. So the only possible outcome from the legislation is to bring Christianity back. So right from the time of the 1992 court case, there were reports of problems coming in from different areas, particularly in rural Manitoba. And the department doesn't ask what's happening, and they don't ask what's in place. There's no reporting system. They presumably still go out to schools to do inspections on things like teaching math class and these things. Don't bother to ask anymore what's happening with prayer, which is just remarkable. As far as I'm aware, this is the only section of the Public Schools Act which has actually gone to court in terms of a charter violation. So this area should be something the province is watching very carefully. Instead of that, the province asks no questions. For the last few years, I've been filing access to information requests to see what's going on in different school divisions, precisely because the department doesn't bother to check, so they're not a source of information there. So what I've asked for, and it's been a similar list over the last few years, I asked each division for a list of schools which have prayer in the classroom as opposed to a common area, a copy of the petition or ballot that's being used, information on how the ballots or petitions are being distributed, what the policy is for those who may not want to participate or may want to opt out, as well as the hour and minute of the day that the prayer is held, and when prayer started versus when the bylaw allowing it was passed. And the bylaw has to be passed each year by the board before prayer can go ahead. Now, to their credit, the provincial guidelines say that school boards should not take any action that would be seen as initiating or promoting the implementation of exercises, and further that schools should play no role in the petitioning process. They say as well that schools should not send out ballots, and that exercises are not to be held during regular instructional time. And they go on further to recommend that if they are held, they be in a common area such as a gym or a multi-purpose area, and people rejoin their classmates after the prayer is over. So what the province is suggesting is that people go somewhere else to pray rather than the classroom. So over the last few years that I've been checking, and it doesn't seem to have gone up or down particularly, the problems move around a bit from division to division and school to school. 20 out of 38 divisions currently have some form of prayer. It seems approximately 18 schools in the province actually still have prayer in the classroom, which seems to be contrary to both the charter case and also the province's own guidelines. In past years, and again this year, we're finding that schools actually have prayer broadcast over the public address system. So of course there's no escape, no meaningful form of opting out in that type of ceremony. At a number of schools, there's a remarkable 100% participation rate, which seems to defy all logic and defy all statistics that it's completely impossible to have a population which is so homogeneous that they're all 100% Protestant. And yet at Smith-Jackson School in Dauphin, we find 100% participation rate. Fort LaBosse and Verdun, 100%. Oak Lake School, 100%. Cola School, that's in the Verdun area, 100%. Roland School, 100%. Domain, 100%. Low Farm, 100%. Benito, 100%. Minitonas, 100%. Alonzo, 100%. And Laurier, 100%. Now, in terms of the ballots, and the province again says that ballots shouldn't be used, the legislation says petition, and ballots in fact are the norm. So these are documents that are produced in most cases by the schools or by parent advisory committees. They're not asking what a person's religious beliefs might be. They're being sent out to parents to ask them to choose the Lord's Prayer. Do you want the Lord's Prayer, yes or no? In an incident I saw last year, parents were not only being told to fill out the ballot, they were being told they had to return it. That was a requirement. In some cases, ballots were actually on school letterhead. In some cases, they were being told to return them to the school. In some cases, ballots are sent home with the kids from school, which is obviously the state promoting a certain religion and asking kids to be involved, asking parents to be involved. In some cases, they're distributed at parent-teacher evenings or other school events where there are petitions, and to the credit of some schools, they do use petitions. Petitions are actually at events at parent-teacher nights and those types of events as well. So again, actually in the school promoting a certain religion. Now, in terms of the time of day, the department again suggests it would be ideal perhaps to have it not in class time, perhaps the end of the day or lunchtime. Instead of that, not too surprisingly, what we see almost exclusively is that they're very first thing in the morning. And what happens in a rural school, kids are off the bus, into the school, they have nowhere else to go. So you have a captive audience. So generally, all the exercises are in the 8:45 to 9 a.m. period. People want to go to their classrooms, they have to be there for attendance, their friends are there, and so this is part of the plan. At St. Marie School, which I believe is down in the St. Claude area, O Canada's played first, and right after that the prayer starts. So very much similar to what was in place back in the 1980s. Now, in terms of opting out, in many cases there seems to be no policy, so people wouldn't know that there even is an option to opt out of the prayer. And let's say, for example, that a student transfers in the middle of the school year, how would they possibly know that there's any particular option where prayer is in place? So a few examples from Garden Valley School Division. I'd ask specifically about what happens for those who don't want to participate. At Prairie Dale School, the response was that those not participating remain in the classroom but not actively participate. So I don't know what that means. At Winkler School, 2 students come to school at 9 to avoid exercises, so they can't come to the school that the public is paying for. A few wait outside the classroom. So prayer in the classroom and students can't attend. At Plum Coulee School, the response was that suitable arrangements are made for those not participating. So again, I don't know what that means exactly. At Emirado School, which is also in the Winkler area, I understand, non-participants go to the library or wait in the hallway near the classroom. So again, we're back to the same scenario we were in the 1980s, where people are being sent to the hallway if they don't want to pray. Now, as a twist in the whole scenario, the Louis Riel School actually holds prayer in the hallway, and so those who don't want to participate actually stay in the classroom, which seems to be creating the same type of provisions in any event. I filed an access to information request with the province as well, because I'd alerted them over the last couple of years about these specific problems. And I'd asked for all correspondence between the department and school divisions. Not a single letter or email was sent by the department in the entire school year last year about school prayer. So there's the response from the department. It's do whatever you want. The province pretends that school divisions are autonomous entities, that somehow these are rogue elements that they can't control, they have no ability to follow what's going on, they can't possibly go in there and correct them, even if they wanted to, which I find quite ludicrous. I mean, school divisions are created under the Public Schools Act, and we have examples of the department intervening in the past in things like the standardized report card issue, or in Steinbach, where there was an effort to build a smoking hut, The reaction in that case, the department was outraged. The deputy minister was screaming down the highway with the flashing light on the vehicle. Immediately, the school division came into compliance. The smoking hut was torn down. The division said it had no choice but to follow the province's direction. So the province is worried about poisoning young people with smoke. It's not worried about somebody poisoning their minds. In terms of a proactive system, the province could actually check ahead of time. They could ask people, if you're going to set up a prayer system, tell us what it is. Send in the paperwork. And just like the papers that I privately asked for, the province could be collecting this data itself to ensure that there's actual compliance. In extreme cases, and right now we're at a point where the province doesn't ask or check, they do actually have the ability to take over school divisions. If school divisions aren't complying, the province can come in and take them over. And if that's what they need to do, they can do that. The other option, I suppose, if the province has legislation in place and they have no ability to control it, they can't control the school divisions, can't control this act, then change the act. Take out this last section then. And the Public Schools Act states towards the very beginning of this section to say that it's non-sectarian, which means that schools will not be religious, then goes on to prescribe a particular system for setting religion in place. So perhaps the safest way and the best way for the province to act then is to take out the remaining sections so it's clear. There's no prayer, period. And there's no mistakes, there's no offenses, there's no breaching of civil rights. So overall, I don't need to paint a negative picture. We've certainly come a long ways from where we were back in 1986, and it's not something where we have a victory parade and things are finalized. That even if there were no legislative scheme in place, there may still be efforts to put something in place and bring prayer back into the schools in some form. So I guess my message is to be vigilant and to ask questions and check what's going on in your local communities. And if you have an MLA who's part of the government, ask them what's going on and why this is happening. So thanks very much for the opportunity to speak, and I don't know if there's any questions or comments. Yes?
My daughter's school in Winnipeg, she gets a lot of, I would call them flyers from various churches, the sort of evangelical churches, inviting the kids to, play basketball or come for some sort of fun paint your face day or balloons or something. And she gets at least, well, each, there's two of them. They get it. I would say there's anywhere from 6 to 10 of these a year from that get stuck in the lunch, in the stuff that comes home from the school. And I just wondered if you had any advice on dealing with that, other than I've thought of just writing a letter, but I'm not sure.
Absolutely, write a letter and call your school division, call your trustee to ask what's happening. And it seems to be akin to promoting a certain political party in a school, and I have no idea why anyone would think that it's appropriate to distribute this type of material in a school or to use the schools in this type of way. It just doesn't make sense. So yeah, I'd ask questions and raise the concern, and I think that's where you start. And there may well be, and I'm sure there are, other people that feel the same as you, and in fact, those people are probably the majority. Yes?
I seem to remember reading this, I was reading this in the paper a while ago. Was it different between the rural schools and the city? Is there a lot more compliance in Winnipeg and Brandon, or?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's mainly a rural problem, and which is particularly tragic because rural minorities are the most vulnerable and have access to the fewest resources, and yet they're the people that are being picked on the most. The only Winnipeg school I think that's actually involved is Winnipeg School Division, which has prayer in 2 schools, and that's a fairly recent development.
Recently, so they just added prayer.
I understand it's been in the last year or 2 that they've just started, yeah. So it's Sergeant Park School and River Elm School are the 2 in Winnipeg schools. Yes? You were first.
There's another one.
Oh, okay.
R. Morrison at Seven Oaks just petitioned the school board to have religious exercises for the 2012-2013 school year.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
And I'm going to be asking you some questions after this.
Okay. Thanks. You have a question?
I did, yeah. The question has more to do with following the curriculum. Do you know much about like what happens in like the private religious schools? For example, the Springs, I think it's the Springs Church, has a private religious school, Springs Academy. And on their website, they have a parent handbook that's available that you can actually look through it completely. And it clearly says that they teach creationism in science class. And I just wondered, I mean, obviously the parents that have signed their children up to go there, you know, that is what they want. But I don't know how they get away with such blatant disregard for, you know, for what science is. You know, I mean, they have religion classes as well, and they're allowed to have a certain number of hours that they're allowed to spend on religion. But like it said, it clearly said creationism is taught in science class.
I wasn't aware of that. Yeah, that's quite remarkable.
Yeah, it's a very long handbook, you know, quite a few pages long, but I did find it in there, and I don't know, it's a battle, I guess, but I don't obviously have a child going there, but I just kind of, you know, the parents are signing the kids up, but do the kids really want that?
Yeah, and it's unfortunate too that we're funding private schools with so much public money now to teach things that we don't teach in public schools. So.
And the amounts that we're funding some of the private schools, like I remember reading, and I don't know if this is an accurate statistic or not, maybe it was when they, you had all of the things in the Winnipeg Free Press a few years ago, that, for example, the Islamic school, I don't remember the name of it, was funded almost 100% by the province. And I don't know how that's possible, for one thing, because I know they only get a certain amount. But I guess it is possible in a way if they aren't getting, maybe their only textbook is the Quran. I don't know. But how these other issues, you know, the prayer is one thing, but there's a lot worse going on in the schools than even the private, the prayers.
Yes, absolutely, and it's a poor use of public money is no question.
I have a question. I have a friend who's a school teacher. How does this work out for him with his rights? He's a non-believer, and he finds himself in this situation where he's basically got state enshrined religion being forced down his throat at work. And is there another avenue that he can take, or what can he do? You know.
I suppose he can complain to his employer and he can complain to the department. The department's response, though, seems to be in every case that the person isn't happy, they should go to court. So the average minority is supposed to pull together $10,000 and go into a 4-year court battle to try to change something that should be fairly straightforward policy. So other than, again, he can speak up for himself and ask questions, he's probably in a very similar situation to a student, though, at the end of the day, although he may not have the same penalties as a student. And what I suspect is still in place for students, if somebody, for example, didn't participate in the manner prescribed by the school, could still be in a position where they could be suspended from school just as they were in the 1980s. So your friend may be in a little better position than that. He may still have some workplace discipline, though, if he doesn't participate as a director. So,
wow.
Interesting question.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Just a follow-up to Jeff's question and add on to what I said. The school is in my division. I'm a teacher in my division.
Okay.
And my big concern is that the school that petitioned is a feeder school for my school. And we teach heritage language, Hebrew and Ukrainian. And this part of Morrison does as well. And my suspicion is that's the community it's coming from. And I'm kind of worried that because we also have the same programs that Art Morrison has, that this might come to me, and it's going to be something that I'm going to have to deal with. And I share your frustration because as a teacher, and an active member of our Teachers Association, I found out only too often that the department takes a hands-off approach to its own legislation and leaves it up to the school divisions to solve issues. We're going through a similar thing right now with the new mandatory report cards. And, you know, that is my concern as a teacher. What happens if the program that gets put in place at our course and parents get the idea to do the same thing at my school? What can I do without losing my job?
Again, I guess it would depend on your particular division. I know in some divisions they do make accommodations for teachers to opt out in some manner, and I don't know if that'll be standing in the hallway listening to the prayer outside the classroom, or if they let you remain in the classroom and listen to the same prayer and opt out in some manner. But yeah, talk to your union and talk to your employer, and certainly talk to the department, because I don't think the department hears enough grief, and they try to pretend these are local problems, and it clearly comes from the province. It doesn't come from local authorities. It's coming from higher up, and they're not getting the legislative power to do this on their own. They're getting it from the province, and so I think the heat has to keep going to the minister's office in the end. So.
Okay.
Earplugs might work.
Yes.
Just stand in front of the class and put earplugs in.
Sure.
They might make a point, but my question is, if I missed it, I apologize, but in your hometown of McGregor, what's the situation now?
Yeah, it seems to be, it's one of the divisions that's actually more or less complying. So of course it's Christian prayer that's in place, which isn't too surprising because that's the intent of the legislation. So in Austin, Plumas, and McGregor, in the elementary schools at least, they have prayer in place, and it's held in a common area. And it seems that they're actually using petitions in that division. That's one of the few divisions that's actually using petitions. When I checked in previous years, though, it was still prayer in the classroom, and so this may be an aberration for this year. It might be back to prayer in the classroom next year. So, but right now they're doing pretty good. They're one of the few shining stars out of the whole system.
How long did the backlash against you and your family last?
I'm not sure that it's really over. There's people there that I still wouldn't trust, and in some ways can't quite fully forgive, and so I don't have a fully established relationship with a lot of people, and I'm okay with that. So. Yes.
I have a friend, longtime friend, who's a school trustee, and he's been a school trustee since 1988, something like that, and he was recently telling me that he's starting to get concerned about the religious right trying to sack the school boards and encouraging people to run for office. And there's now a school trustee in my area who's just come on board in the last election, who's got an agenda, and it's a Christian right agenda, and it's not just about prayer in the schools. It's about the science curriculum and the social policy about clubs and field trips and dances and sex education and the whole shebang. And this guy's concerned about it. He's concerned about the next election and if there's going to be more of those people running. Are you seeing that?
I don't really have any experience with that. I don't doubt it's the case, though, and it seems that from the research on the prayer issue in the schools, there are some evangelical groups that seem to be behind some of the petitioning and balloting. So no doubt those forces are out there, and no doubt they'd like to take over as much of the schools and anything else they can. So I guess the best thing is to keep an eye on it and try to get some better people to actually run and take charge and take responsibility. The best you can do. Yes.
Is it still a Protestant only or predominant Protestant issue? Or, there's a lot of Catholics coming into the province.
Yeah, there are.
Is that something?
Yeah, there's actually a couple of schools down in the St. Claude area that have Catholic exercises. Otherwise, though, it's pretty much a Protestant system, and that's because Protestants dominate most places. So that's what it was designed for, and it's filling its job. Yes.
How much time do you spend gathering this information and doing all that kind of stuff?
It takes a number of hours, and sometimes you have to make more than one request. One request I made this year, the school division said, well, we responded to this 4 years ago, so we don't have to answer again. So then you have to make a complaint to the ombudsman, which takes some further time. And so I, in terms of hours, overall, it'd probably be a few days of work, and then going through it is, you know, a good day of work probably too. So it'd be much nicer if the department did this at the front end and was actually doing the analysis and keeping tabs. But if it's my job, so be it.
Are there any lawyers that would take these cases pro bono?
Going back to court is a pretty difficult process, and even from the time from 1986, it took till 1992, and thousands of dollars and huge amounts of resources to go to court. So court is a pretty difficult option. It may well be that this issue ends up back in court if the province can't take a more moral and more responsible approach, though it might well be back in school. In terms of the 1992 challenge by the Manitoba Association for Rights and Liberties, yeah, it largely was a pro bono case. I think lawyers that are quite interested in civil rights took on the issue, and a lot of those people are still around. We have some very good people in the legal community that probably could help if it comes to that, so hopefully it won't. But.
If it came to that, what would you predict would be the outcome?
I think what's in place is no different than what was in place prior to the court challenge. So at the end of the day, if you show up at one of these schools, get off the bus, walk in the classroom, prayer is being held in the classroom. If you want to opt out, you're told to go to the hallway. So at the end of the day, I think a court wouldn't have any difficulty in seeing that this is a breach of freedom of religion in the charter, and so that would be quite clear. Another issue that came up in the Ontario court challenge was that this causes people, forces them to identify their religious beliefs. So you're breaching the religious freedom in terms of people's privacy. They may not be distinguishable by looking at them. You might not know that they're an atheist or know that they're a Jehovah's Witness. Suddenly you put in a system in place where people, young children, have to disclose their religious beliefs, which is also a breach of people's religious freedoms. So on a couple of grounds, I think the court would probably make exactly the same decision it did before. So hopefully the province is wise enough to stop wasting time on this and simply change the law so that it's clear. In most of these communities, in the rural areas, there's a number of churches. If they want kids to pray, there's churches right there. They can go to church every morning if they want, open up the doors and pray away.
It's interesting you say that because it makes me think of something. I'm a nurse, and we got a memo last year, maybe a couple of years ago now. When people are admitted to hospital, you do your basic data intake. One of the questions that's always been on there since time immemorial is, what is your religion? We're no longer allowed to ask that. We got a memo that's it's now considered a breach of FIA, the Personal Health Information Act or whatever. Yeah. And somebody had complained, I guess, that when they were in hospital, that I guess they just named their religion, and all of a sudden a chaplain showed up. And they're saying, wait a minute, I never asked to see anybody. So now we're not allowed to ask religion anymore. What we have to ask instead is, would you like to state a religion, and would you like to be put on the chaplain's list for example? And if they say no, that's the end of it.
Yeah.
Now, just a straw poll based on my patients, I would say 80% of them declare nothing.
Right.
There's no longer a religion listed on their chart. So you're right, like why would that not apply to the schools? The same thing.
And it's interesting too, because my sense is since 1986 that society has become much more diverse and people have become much less tied to the church in general, and yet we're still persisting with exactly the same problems that we had back in the 1980s. And the province should know better and should take a leadership role, and that's their job. They're our leaders. Sorry, there's a question in the back. Sorry.
I was just thinking back to my own experience going through like praying in school and being a rural Manitoba kid, and there's no way in the 80s, like when I was however old I was, that I would ever be able to articulate my displeasure at prayer in school. So I'm just curious, at such a kind of a young age, how did you get like the courage, determination, and resolve to see that through the end, given the incredible hostility that you must have went through or met on the way?
I'm not sure of the answer to that, and I don't know that it's anything that anybody else couldn't have done or wouldn't have done. I was on the student council at the time as the vice president, and partly because the students had spoken so clearly on this issue, partly it was a leadership matter that I had to take responsibility for the people that elected me in part. And I guess overall it at times was a difficult experience. At the same time, I met some really fantastic people and people that took tremendous risks and made tremendous sacrifices to help me, so that part in the end was encouraging. I don't think I'm in any way exceptional, and I think in the same circumstances I'm sure anybody probably could have and would have done the same thing. At the same time, I guess it's obviously a big commercial for not opting out of prayer, because what happens is, well, you know, you're going to have your property vandalized, people are going to phone and threaten to kill you and so on, so it's probably in some ways helped the authorities to carry on with prayer and not worry about people trying to opt out.
Did anyone else vote out with you?
One older student did, actually. He was 18 and so didn't need permission to leave the classroom. That lasted for a while, but again, prayer was still broadcast through the whole school, and so it didn't really work out. A number of students actually wrote letters to the principal. There was probably, I think, 15 or so that wrote letters to the principal saying the suspension was unfair and that I should be allowed back to school, which was particularly courageous on their parts, because a lot of them were getting in real trouble over this issue at home, first of all for signing the petition or for supporting me in any way. So I didn't end up turning in the letters to the principal, but that was very courageous in itself, so, and the best that could be expected, I think, in the circumstances.
So my question was concerning all of the other religions that are out there, Buddhists and the whole list of other people that are in our schools at this particular point. They are being at this point forced to listen to the Lord's Prayer.
It would seem so, and certainly it appears, for example, in the Morden Winkler area, at least anyway, there are students who opt out in some way, and in the one case that I talked about, they're actually still in the classroom. In another one, they're told to go out and stand in the hallway, so presumably they're within earshot of what's happening. And in the Louis Riel school division scenario, the prayer is held in the hall, the students are within earshot in the classroom, so they can clearly tell what's going on, and the other students can tell that, you know, these people are different religion than us, and so it's still the same problems that existed back in the 1980s. Yes?
I'm a bit of a hard ass on things. I'd like to see some of these people led away in handcuffs, but I guess it's not realistic. So I read Ezra Levin's book on the horror story of human rights commissions. And what would happen if students started filing human rights commission complaints against these people, and they were put into that meat grinder? That would be a way of making them back off prayers.
Yeah, I had my own complaint to the Human Rights Commission on this issue, and so the intention was that it would make a decision one way or the other, go to arbitration before I finished the school year. And it ended up that dragged on. I was actually finished undergrad by the time that they mediated the settlement, so it took them more than 3 years, and that kind of process really isn't very useful. So for whatever reason, we have a Human Rights Commission in Manitoba that doesn't seem to be able to resolve matters and doesn't have enough resources, I think, and so it wouldn't hurt for people to complain, but in terms of our Human Rights Commission being something that provides useful remedies in a timely manner, it just doesn't. So.
Well, Levin said the same thing, they take forever, but he does say that they put you through a lot of grief while they're doing that. So
yeah.
If the students made complaints on just about specific trustees or principals or whatever, wouldn't that be justice served?
It certainly helps, and I don't want to discourage people from doing whatever they can. If you're in a position to make a phone call, make a phone call. If you're in a position to meet with a trustee or send a letter, then do that. And certainly if there are people that have the ability to go ahead and make a complaint to the Human Rights Commission, absolutely do it, and it's certainly not going to hurt. And at some point, the province may get tired of spending money on lawyers on this issue. Yes, great.
Is the Association of Mice Rights and Liberties in the same category as this? the Association of Rights and Liberties?
They did ask about what was happening, and I'd sent them some material, I think, in 2010, but I didn't receive any follow-up. They're monitoring the issue, I guess, is the best we can say, and so I don't know if their intention is to see about possibly going back to court if it persists as a problem. I haven't been to a meeting there for a number of years, so I don't know what their take is exactly, but at least they're interested anyway, and that's good news for sure.
Just to let you know, in my little community, it started about 10 years ago. An evangelical type church started up with fellows from the South African way around the very great speaker. The church eventually got to be very large. They have a very large group that goes to the schools and fits in very well with the schools. Now he's mayor. Now he's mayor of our community. And what they did do is very difficult to remove them, because within their unit what they did is they created an inner core group. And the inner core group have to be very dedicated, and they get to go to the different barbecues, the different this, the different that. Plus they get some other gains like free properties and they have some tax benefits and stuff like that. It gets to be very, very difficult to change that when it comes into a community. He's probably slated to replace Big Case.
All right. We do have time for one or two more questions, so if you have a good question, ask it now. This is your last chance. Yes.
Are there any provinces that have a better record than Manitoba on this, or a better system?
From what I understand, some provinces don't have a prayer system at all, and so I did an interview recently from an Alberta radio station, and he was just amazed that we had anything like this, and according to him, they have no type of system. The Western provinces entered under sort of different conditions, and so Saskatchewan and Alberta are in a little different position than Manitoba, so I don't think they have the same problems there, for example. And the real problem provinces had been the ones where the court challenges came, and that was British Columbia, Manitoba, and Ontario. So just about any place is probably better, although I've heard that there have been problems in Ontario as well where prayer is creeping back in and being forced back in. So, yes?
Do you see any difference depending on who the government has been in Manitoba? Like specifically, has there been any difference between Gary Doer's government or Bernie Selinger's government?
Not at all, actually, no. The NDP was in power when I was first kicked out of school, when this issue first came up, and at that time the province could have said, well, this is ridiculous, we're kicking people out of school, refusing them an education because of their religious beliefs. The province could have acted immediately and changed the act so this problem is over. Didn't do that. The Philman government came into power, and I believe the Philman government was in power when the court challenge came, spent thousands and thousands of dollars of taxpayers' money defending the case, and of course lost. And then problems reemerged, the NDP is back in power, and the response is that, well, it's not our problem, and we can't even ask what's going on. And if you do tell them there's problems, they don't ask any questions either. So, no, I think it's been fairly consistently awful right from the 1980s onward.
Right on. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks very much.